Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another one of our Free Friday community classes right here on the YouTubes. This week we are continuing in a series on working with elemental harmonizing, working with the herbs. So this week we're going to be focusing on air imbalances and how we can work with herbs to reconcile those air imbalances. We started this series off looking at earth in the winter, so you can look at the harmonization of the element earth and the temperament of coldness by searching for that on YouTube. This week, we're doing air. For folks who don't know, I practice a four-element constitutional style of herbalism. I work with the four elements as a language system that I can use to dovetail and explore not only the herbs, but individual temperaments, constitutions, diseases, and pathways to harmony. So that's where all of this comes from, very informed by the works of Paracelsus and Empedocles. And with that, a little overview of this week's class. First, we're going to look at springtime. We've just officially entered springtime on February the 1st, the agricultural wheel of the year. We're in spring now. And the air element of dryness. We're going to look at some disharmonies of air, and then we're going to talk about herbs that can help harmonize airy imbalances, airy disharmonies, and then some adjunct therapies. So first, here's a little look at the compass that I work with in my spiritual practice, in my green sorceress practice, and in the way that I do herbalism. There are many, many different language systems that folks use to explore nature. All of them are correct. All of them are accurate. One is not better than the other. Nature is big enough that we can have various language systems to explore, and all of them can be great. Examples would be the Chinese five-element theory, or the yin-yang, the Ayurveda Tridosha theory, Western Vitalist six tissue states, and ad infinitum. I work with the four elements. So right now, we have entered into the springtime, which is ruled by the element of air and the temperament of dryness. You can see the other three seasons and elements and temperaments on the wheel here. And so when we come into spring, what we find is that the seasonal energetic of dryness starts to increase. Folks can become more dry. Sometimes people start getting those early seasonal allergies that cause dryness. A lot of folks, after a long winter, being indoors with recycled heated air, really feeling a dryness over the skin, the eyes, around the nose, and the mouth. We see people using chapstick and lip balm a lot more lotion this time of year. And of course, it really starts during the winter when we're experiencing coldness, because coldness tends to condense and move fluids, right? But as we move into spring proper, it really exacerbates the sense of dryness. So folks that lean dry constitutionally, like yours truly, this is a season of aggravation where I am temperamentally very dry, and then seasonally it becomes very dry. So this is an opportunity for me to take really good care of myself. Similarly, folks that maybe run the opposite of dry, damp, right? They normally constitutionally run really damp. They might find that their bodies and spirits and personalities and moods move into a drier state during the springtime. And sometimes that feels good, sometimes it does not. We always treat what we see and listen to the wisdom of the body and trust that wisdom on our way. So seasonal influence of air and dryness, personal temperament of air and dryness can lead to aggravations. And those aggravations can come in the form of excessive air, right? So airy folks can become too airy, or people can have too little water, right? So what happens is that air is opposite water on the compass that I work. And so when we see the air temperament, the air energy increase, it can sometimes decrease, or at least allude to the fact that the water temperament is decreasing in the face of excess air. So some people experience too much air energy, too much dryness. Some people experience not enough water energy or not enough dampness. The cool thing is that both of those pathologies, energetic pathologies, lead to the same place, which is dryness. So that is just one of many expressions that we're going to talk about today, but it's where I would like to start. So, what are some of the influences of air? First, the element of air influences wind, right? This is a windy energy. We see talk of wind in traditional Chinese herbalism, traditional Chinese medicine, and wind brings change, right? The wind flutters around, it blows in one direction and then quickly shifts into another direction. So, when we see an aggravation of air energy in somebody, oftentimes the symptoms or the state is very changing. The headache, starts here and it moves over here, then it moves over here, then it moves over here, or the digestion goes from hot to dry, from loose to constipated, back and forth, back and forth. It's this really temperamental, windy, changing energy. So when we see an air aggravation in the body, we look for symptoms that change a lot. It's not that the issue is predictable, it's not a set pattern, the pain doesn't happen in the same way in the same place all the time. It moves around, right? It has this ghosting energy where it moves. This is a very air aggravated condition. The air element also influences thought, right? Air is the ruling element of the mind, of thinking, of consciousness. And so air issues are always related to the mental atmosphere. So when we see people worrying, uh, catastrophic thinking, projecting into the future, obsessive compulsive patterns, this is more often than not an aggravation of wind. It's too much air energy in the body, and that windiness causes us to overthink, over process. What if, what if, what if? Going to the negative, going to the worst possible scenario in every situation. So the mental atmosphere is very influenced by uh, the air element. And then, of course, breath, right? This makes sense that breath is ruled by the element of air. First would be the act of respiration, that when we inhale, we are inhaling air, right? And when we exhale, we are exhaling air. So anything involving the breath, the ability to breathe, the freeness and fluidity of the breath is influenced by air energy. I should also mention that because the air element is dry and the lungs very much do not like to be dry, when we see an excess of air energy in the lungs, which is a seat of air energy, they start to dry out, right, and become stuck and stagnant. The other side to breath is that what surrounds us is brought inside of our bodies, and what is deep within us is sent out into the world around us. So air also rules relationships of reciprocity, of sharing, of breathing in from the world around us and exhaling from within us to the world around us. So, and the issues there can often be an aggravation of air. Then we have the nervous system and the electrical system within the body. So when we see nervous buzz, right? People can't settle down. They're high strung, they're wound up, they're filled with nervous energy. There's like a palpable hum in their peripheral and central nervous system. Oftentimes it's too much air energy. And for most of us, this hits very intuitive, right? Like we understand, like, oh, if there's too much of the air element in the body, it would create this ringing, buzzing, droning sensation in the nervous system. It's very, very intuitive, right? So that's one part of it. One other part is communication. That sound and gesture and light travel across the air, so we consider that communication both internally and externally are ruled by the element of air. How well is the body communicating within itself? How well is the brain and the liver talking to each other, or the heart and the gut? Similarly, how are the communication levels between us and the people around us, right? So when there are issues there, when things are dry and brittle, there's too much air, or maybe when communication is not happening at all, there's a lack of air. So if we revisit this four elemental compass that I work with, you will notice that opposite air is the element of water. So when there's too much air, we turn to the element of water to help pacify. Now, this is usually very challenging to people when I first teach them, because We want the check on air to be earth. We want to ground out. We think about the opposite of airy, light ethereal energy being like dense, solid ground. And maybe to some degree that's accurate. In fact, when we look at the opposite of air and fire, we see that earth and water are there paired up. But here's the reason why it's water and not earth: because of temperament, because of constitution. So if you are an air dominant person by nature, like I am, if air, a predominance of air, is your natural state, your version of normal, your version of sacred center, the earth element can feel stifling, claustrophobic, and too stuck, right? It can feel like cement shoes. So we don't want to lock people up. Rather, we want to bring in water energy, which is denser and more solid and more formed than air, but not so heavy that it grounds the air person out. The animal totem of the element of air is a bird, right? So birds always want to be able to be free, to fly, to take flight at any moment. And the earth energy is just too condensing, it's too restricting. So when there's too much air energy in the body, the first class of herbs that I think about will be the demulcents, right? Demulcents are herbs that, especially when soaked in tepid water, create mucilage. They create this slimy, gooey material that, when taken into the body, it simultaneously hydrates, nourishes, and coats the tissue. So when we take a demulcent tea, we drink that, it coats the throat, it coats the belly, it cools, it softens, and it hydrates. So it's very, very nice when there's too much dry air energy to bring in these damp, soothing, coating, mucilaginous demulcent herbs. So a few that I think about as antidote herbs to too much air energy. The first, of course, would be marshmallow, specifically marshmallow root, corn silk, licorice root, violet leaf, and comfrey. And with comfrey, it can be leaf or root. Leaf would definitely be my preference. These can be soaked in water to make a tea. Comfrey you would want to use in moderation in this way, or worked with in an essence or a few drops of a tincture to do deeper plant spirit work. So these demulcent herbs are really lovely in helping us check that excess air and kind of bring us back down, check the excess dryness with demulcent energy. Then we have plants that have an affinity for the water. They thrive in the water, they grow well in the water, so they bring us water medicine, right? And two that I think about would be willow, which is really the epitome of a water expressing plant, and lotus, which is a plant that grows out of the water. And the best way really to work with both of these allies would be in the form of flower essence or an energetic essence. Then we have lunar allies. So these are herbs that are aligned to the moon. They're plant spirits that have an affinity with the moon. They follow lunar cycles, or there's overlap in their areas of influence. And the greatest among them would be Una or mugwort. One of our greatest lunar allies. This is the plant that turns silvery under the light of the full moon, opens up the faculties of dream, helps us to release excess air energy when we sleep through inner vision and the imaginal realm. So mugwort can be really lovely to smolder a little before bedtime or keep a bundle next to where you sleep. Last but not least would be herbs that are juicy, right? Because they contain water. So they're bringing in that antidote to excess airness. So think about berries and fruits that have a lot of juice in them, even cucumbers, watermelon. And then think about herbs that are blood building. Herbs like dates and longan and goji that help build and lubricate and nourish the blood. There's always a potential for blood deficiency through the lens of traditional Chinese medicine in folks that are very air dominant. So be mindful there. Another thing I consider is how to work with herbs that address the main air issues, which tend to be overthinking, negative thinking, nervousness, anxiety, panic, worry, right? Body buzz. So think about the nervines that also have an affinity for the water element. So these are herbs that settle the buzz out of the nervous system, but won't aggravate the airy energy. Lemon balm, even though this is an herb that I would generally consider to be quite airy in nature, is nervine enough that it almost is homeopathic. It almost comes into the body and teaches the body how to do air in a more appropriate way. As a very airy person, I can tell you, I love the way lemon balm feels. It's very affirming to me. It allows me to be who I am, but gets me out of that sort of fight or flight excess air state. Chamomile, sweet, building, nourishing, earthy, bitter. This one's going to slow everything down, get the energy moving in a downward fashion for folks that have that really upward diffusing air energy. Passion flower, easily one of my favorite nervines for excess air conditions. I consider passion flower to be quite an earthy herb, but again, grounding enough, but not so grounding that it's going to feel restrictive. Skullcap, a very beautiful nervine that really helps to release the buzz, the nervousness out of the system and the mind. And valerian. Valerian root is not suitable for every constitution, because valerian runs hot. So when we have fire type people that have that really warm, transformative type of anxiety, restlessness, insomnia, and we give them valerian, it actually aggravates the condition. This is what happens when people give herbal medicine based on what the herb is good for, rather than understanding the deeper spirit of the plant and the deeper spirit of the person's body that plant is going into. It's a 50-50 shot at best, but when we understand energetics, action categories, body affinities, then we really can get it right, all the time. Think too about working with diaphoretics, right? Because these are herbs that relax the exterior or release the exterior of the body, which is what we'd say in Chinese medicine, and allow excess wind, excess buzz, sort of a pathway out of the body, right? That opens all of the windows of the body through the pores and lets that nervous, windy energy out. One thing that you will see in a lot of expressions of pop herbalism is people talk about the remedy. They talk about the herb that's good for a particular illness. This herb is good for nervousness, so take it, without addressing a pathway of elimination. The fact that if you are bringing an herb in that's creating a change, the body has to unfold a pattern and release it. And if we don't create space for that, sometimes we just run into a brick wall, or sometimes things get worse before they get better, or sometimes the healing process just takes forever and people give up, right? Because they're not seeing any good results. So diaphoretics, very good for air. Sage, common garden sage, this is Salvia officinalis. For me, this is quite an airy, dry plant. So I would only want a little bit of this herb in a formula, just enough to coax the pores open, just enough for diaphoresis, and that's it. Lemon balm is coming up again as another nervine that's airy but also diaphoretic. This is one I lean into very heavily for this work, and probably a preferred one for me would be Nepeta-Cataria, the catnip, common catnip. Cooling, settling, grounding, a little bit of a hypnotic, watery energy, and very diaphoretic. So for me, catnip, especially in more spirit dose work, plant spirit work, is very effective for folks with excess air conditions. And then we want to consider nourishing the nerves in the blood. Dryness is a state of atrophy in Western vital tissue states, right? When we see the body become too dry, we recognize that vital fluids are not moving into the tissue. So they're brittle and they're kind of in a wasting state. They are undernourished, malnourished, they're deficient. So we want to feed them. So all of these allies are really beautiful for folks who run nervous. The nerves are overworked. The nerves are buzzy and spastic, right? Let's feed them because they are overworked. They're working really hard. Think about Bacopa monieri, also known as Brahmi. I prefer Bacopa over the other herb that's called Brahmi, which is Centella asiatica. Bacopa is sweeter and more grounding and more nourishing, more syrupy, right? That's the vibe we want. Milky oats, uh, rolled oats in oatmeal, milky oat tops in a tincture, oat seed in tea. All of that is fantastic. This is really uh, food for the nervous system. Dates, jujube dates, medjool, diglet, doesn't matter, and red clover. Red clover I consider to be quite a cool earthy herb, but this is one we can bring in to nourish the nervous system as well. And then let's talk about a couple of sort of non-herbal things that folks can do when they're feeling very airy, right? First would be breath work. To learn different techniques of breath work, like the heart math coherence method or other forms that works with respiration, the inhaling and exhaling of air to bring us deeper into harmony, to comb through the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems to get us out of fight or flight, right? Very helpful. Hydration. If you're an air dominant person, if you run airy, you have to drink water. You have to be hydrated, and you may even need to be more hydrated than the average human animal. Hydration needs to be a very centered and very prioritized thing for you as a person. It will change your life. Water connections, go swimming, go put your feet in a stream, go walk across the wet grass in the morning, take warm baths, do respiratory steams, get in touch with water. It's very, very comforting. Interestingly, a lot of people who are incredibly air dominant also tend to be a little uncomfortable in water. They're not great swimmers. They're not really comfortable going underwater, holding their breath. So this can be a really nice invitation to start making friends with the water element, right? Do physical exercise. Get out of your head and into your body, right? Ground yourself out through your own tissues. And I really like physical exercise that brings on a healthy sweat in airy people. Let the water flow. Let your vital fluids flow. You will find that in addition to all of the physical benefits that sweating will induce, that it plays a really good role in your mental health. Just getting out there and doing something strenuous enough that you break a sweat, if you can, if that's healthy for you. And if you're not sweating, you might not be drinking enough water. Saunas, I love saunas and steam rooms. Consider nourishing foods, making sure that you're eating really well-balanced foods for your body, and the act of eating itself is very grounding. It's very hard for the body to stay in fight or flight when we're trying to digest. Food tends to nudge us into rest and digest, especially with the support of your favorite digestive bitters. So work with digestive bitters to nudge the parasympathetic system on and get us out of fight or flight. Last but not least, gua sha, body oil or body work that uses oils to lubricate, hydrate, moisturize, and nourish the body. This is very, very important for airy people, again, to get out of our heads a little bit, to get down into our physical bodies, to feel our whole bodies, to make friends with our feet, right? To get all the way in there. So all of that, just the very, very, very tip of the mountain of this perspective of elemental herbalism, of working with the elements. But if you intuitively feel like you tend to carry around a lot of excess air energy, you can put some of these practices, work with some of these incredible plant spirits, and see how it feels for you as you move forward. With that, I want to invite you over to my Patreon, where we do our plant spirit journeys every month, advanced classes, courses, Through the Hedge, which is behind the scenes look at me working with clients, Q&A sessions, community chats, book clubs. I wanted to spotlight this month's plant spirit journey, which has already started, but you can jump in on the next one. We're sitting with dandelion this month for an entire lunar cycle, and there's a little screen capture there of all the downloads that I put out every month for these plant spirit journeys on Patreon. So this month, everybody got version 4 of the plant spirit journey guide. Tells you everything you need to know to sit for a month with a plant and learn directly from the plant. We did a big dandelion monograph, magic, medicine, folklore, etymology, recipes. There's a journal page and a calendar. I did a guided audio meditation where we journey by spirit to meet dandelion, a daily dandelion guided meditation, and then a full moon working for dandelion. All of our work this month with dandelion, and there's so many different ways we could have went, really focused on cutting cords, releasing, letting go of things that we don't want to carry with us into the bright half of the year, stuff that's holding us back, cords and connections that we're feeding and nourishing that we want to call our energy back. So we are calling on the lion-toothed dandelion spirit to help us gnaw through those cords and free us and bring us back into the moment. So if you're interested in this work, if you want to go deeper, there's a link down in the video details below. I'd love to see you there. With that, have a lovely week with blessings of peace and plenty. Thanks for your support. I'll see you next time.